The most popular I ever felt in my life was also the emptiest. And the strange thing is, I built that emptiness myself, one small compromise at a time, until there was almost nothing left of who I actually was. My name is Noah, I am 28 now, and what I am about to tell you took me a long time to admit, even to myself. It started when I was 24. I had just moved to a new city for a job at a mid-sized communications firm. New place, new people, no existing reputation to fall back on. I was starting completely fresh, and something about that felt like an opportunity. Not to grow exactly, more like to rewrite, to become a version of myself that would land better in the world than the quieter, more awkward version that had always felt slightly out of place. So I started paying attention, very close attention, to what made people laugh, what made them lean in, what kind of person got invited to things and remembered fondly. I watched how the well-liked people in my office moved through conversations. How they agreed without being boring, how they disagreed without making anyone uncomfortable, how they made everyone in a room feel like the most interesting person there. And I started doing the same things. Slowly at first, then more naturally, until it stopped feeling like imitation and started feeling like habit. Within 6 months I had a reputation in the office as someone easy to be around. Fun, agreeable, the kind of person who made a room feel lighter. My colleague Ryan, who was 27 and had worked there for 3 years, told me once that I was one of those rare people who genuinely got along with everyone. He meant it as a compliment. I smiled and said thank you, but somewhere underneath the smile something felt slightly off, like a note played almost in tune but not quite. I didn't look at that feeling closely. I just kept going. The version of myself I was building was working. People liked me, actually liked me. I got included in plans I would never have been invited into before. I became the person who got pulled into conversations across different groups, the connector, the one who belonged everywhere. And after years of feeling like I belonged nowhere properly, that felt extraordinary. But then something started happening that I didn't expect. I began to lose track of what I actually thought about things. It happened so gradually. In conversations I would naturally scan for what the other person wanted to hear before I responded. Not lying exactly, more like selecting from my real thoughts and leading with whatever would land best. If someone loved a film I found boring, I found things I genuinely liked about it and led with those. If someone held a strong opinion I privately disagreed with, I softened my response until it was close enough to agreement that nobody noticed the gap. I told myself I was just being diplomatic, emotionally intelligent, socially aware, but what I was actually doing was disappearing. One small edited response at a time. Have you ever been in a conversation and realized halfway through that you have no idea what you actually think? That you are so focused on managing how you come across that your real reaction never even surfaces? Because that was becoming my daily experience. Not occasionally, constantly. By the time I was 25, the performance had become so automatic that I genuinely struggled to access my own opinions in real time. I would sit in meetings and wait to see which way the room was leaning before I added anything. I would ask questions in social situations instead of sharing perspectives, not because I was curious but because questions were safer. They revealed nothing. They required no real position. I had become a mirror, reflecting everyone back to themselves in the most flattering way possible. And people loved the mirror. Of course they did. Everyone looks good in a mirror that is angled just right. What happened next surprised me and I still think about it often. There was a Friday evening, about 18 months into this new city, new version of myself. A group of us had gone out after work, maybe 8 people, good energy, easy conversation. I was doing what I always did, moving smoothly through the group, making everyone feel comfortable, laughing at the right moments, filling silences before they could become awkward. At one point I stepped outside for some air. I stood on the pavement alone for a few minutes, and I had a thought that stopped me completely. I did not know if I was having a good time. I had been so focused on making sure everyone else was having a good time that I had not checked in with myself once all evening. And when I actually checked, I found nothing clear. Not enjoyment, not boredom, just a kind of blankness where a feeling should have been. Like trying to find a channel on a television that had no signal. I went back inside. I kept going, but that moment stayed with me like something lodged. I started noticing it more after that. The blankness, the way I moved through experiences without really landing inside them. I would be at dinner with people who genuinely liked me and feel completely alone inside it. Not because anything was wrong with them. Because I was not actually there. The version of me that showed up to those dinners was assembled, curated, managed. The actual me had stopped being invited somewhere along the way. I want to ask you something and I want you to be honest with yourself. Is there a version of you that you perform for the world? A you that is slightly adjusted, softened, rearranged to be more acceptable? Most people have some version of this and that is human and understandable. But what happens when that performed version becomes the only one that ever shows up? What do you do when you have edited yourself so thoroughly that you cannot find the original anymore? That was the question I was sitting with at 25, alone in a city full of people who thought they knew me. The person who cracked something open, without meaning to, was a man named Sam. He was 31, worked in a different department, and was known in the office for being blunt in a way that made some people uncomfortable and other people deeply relieved. He did not seem to care much about being liked, not in a hostile way. He just had this ease with his own opinions that I found unsettling at first and then quietly fascinating. We ended up working on a project together for about 6 weeks. And in that time Sam said things I was not used to hearing from people. He disagreed with me directly. He told me once that my idea for a presentation structure was too safe and that I was clearly capable of something sharper. He asked what I actually thought about things rather than accepting my diplomatic non-answers. At first I handled him the way I handled everyone. I stayed agreeable, stayed smooth, kept the surface calm. But then one afternoon he said something that I have thought about almost every day since. We were reviewing something together and I gave him one of my carefully balanced responses, seeing both sides, landing nowhere. And he looked at me and said, "Noah, what do you actually think? Not the version that makes everyone comfortable. What do you actually think?" I did not have an answer. And the silence that followed was one of the most uncomfortable and honest moments I had experienced in years. Because the truth was I did not know. I had curated myself for so long that I had lost access to unedited reactions. I had spent so much energy managing how I landed in every room that I had stopped developing any real inner life to draw from. Sam did not make a big deal of it. He moved on, but I could not. I went home that evening and sat quietly for a long time. And for the first time in a long time I tried to just think. Not strategically, not with one eye on how it would sound. Just think about what I liked, what I actually found interesting, what I believed about things, what I wanted from my own life without anyone else's approval attached to it. It was harder than it sounds. There were long pauses where nothing came, places where I reached for an opinion and found only the ghost of one, something I had borrowed from someone else's reaction and never returned. But some things came, slowly, small honest things. I realized I was exhausted by loud social environments and had been pretending to love them for over a year. I realized I found most small talk genuinely draining and had been performing enthusiasm for it constantly. I realized there were conversations I had been steering away from for months because they might reveal a version of me that someone somewhere would like less. None of these were dramatic discoveries, but they were real, and real felt like something I had not had access to in a long time. The change after that was not sudden. I want to be honest about that. I did not wake up the next day and become fully authentic and at peace with myself. It was slower and messier than that, but I started making small different choices. I started letting silences exist instead of filling them. I started occasionally saying I did not agree with something instead of finding the diplomatic middle. I started answering the question of what I thought with what I actually thought, even when it felt risky. Even when I could feel the pull to soften it. Some people responded to the shift with curiosity. A few pulled back slightly and I noticed that too, the ones who had liked the mirror and found something less immediately comfortable in its place. That stung a little. I am not going to pretend it didn't. There is a specific kind of loss in realizing that some people liked a version of you that was never entirely real. But something else happened too. The connections that remained started feeling different. More solid, more honest, like there was actual weight in them that had not been there before. Ryan, my colleague who had once called me a rare person who got along with everyone, came to me one afternoon and said he felt like he was getting to know a different side of me lately. He said it felt more real. I did not know how to explain that he was right without explaining everything else. So I just said I was figuring some things out. He nodded like that made complete sense. I am 28 now. I still care about people. I still want the people around me to feel comfortable. That has not changed because it was never entirely performance. Some of it was always genuine. But I carry it differently now. I show up to conversations with my actual opinions inside me. I let people see when something lands wrong. I disagree sometimes. I leave silences unfilled. I take up space in my own way instead of reshaping myself to fit whatever space I am in. The version of me that everyone liked was not a lie. But it was not the whole truth either. And living inside a half-truth for long enough will hollow you out in ways you do not notice until you are standing outside on a pavement on a Friday night, unable to tell if you are enjoying your own life. What I understand now is this. Being liked by everyone is not the same as being known by anyone. And being known, really known, even by just a few people, is worth more than all the easy approval in the world. If any part of this story felt familiar, I want you to sit with that. Not with judgment, just with honesty. Ask yourself whose version of you has been showing up lately, and whether the real one has had any space to exist. Leave a comment below. Tell me if you have ever felt lost inside a version of yourself you built for someone else. This space is for exactly that kind of honesty. If this story reached something real in you, share it with someone who might need it.